Well, let me thank you for being here in the auditorium. Thank you for being online as we continue our study of the book of Job. Let me begin by just saying thank you to so many who have been praying for Pam over the last 3 weeks. We were able to make it home from the hospital yesterday. We began home health care, and she is gaining strength. And again, we thank you so much for the attentiveness and especially your prayerfulness on our behalf during that time. Well, tonight we're going to meet a man by the name of Eliphaz, who is one of the friends of Job that was introduced to us in an earlier chapter as they've come together. Covenanted, it said, the three of them have come to spend time together with Job. And we'll pick up and look at him in just a moment. Let me remind you just a bit of the background of how we're seeking to approach the book of Job. We're trying to go through it in a textual way. Tonight, we will actually have the challenge of covering about 10 chapters of material in the dialogue that is between Eliphaz and Job's responses. I want you to understand who Job was, what he was going through. I want to understand the friends and the things they did well and the things they did poorly. Because two things, when we're finished with this series in a few weeks, that I want us to have. One is a better understanding of the concept of suffering. Well, why? Where did it come from? How can we better equip ourselves to deal with those times in our lives when problems arise? Secondly, you may not be in a position of lament that Job engaged in last week's lesson. That's in chapter 3. In fact, you may never have been in a position in your life where you felt that burden, that pain, that deep hurt that caused him to cry out to God and in a sense about God and what was going on. But if you haven't, I guarantee you there are those who have. And there are those in your circle of friends tonight who are exactly in that location. And they don't even know how to voice that lament that they wish they could. And you may be that mouthpiece. And so we're trying to learn how to deal with our own suffering, but we're also trying to become better equipped at being caregivers, ministers of care to the people in our lives around us. And tonight's lesson, while most of it's going to be working through that tedious 10-chapter section, will conclude with some very practical things for each of us to use. We don't know much about Eliphaz or, for that matter, Bildad or Zophar. They were three almost anonymous friends. We have their names, but no biographical sketch. The name Eliphaz means God is fine gold. It has to do with the preciousness of the nature of God. So we certainly would attach to the fact that Eliphaz, and likely his family preceding him, were individuals who were worshippers of Jehovah, because that is the name or the Elohim form of it that's used here. He's likely an Edomite. He's mentioned as coming from the town of Tema, which is a town in the territory of Edom. The descendants of Esau, if you go back to Genesis chapter 36, you'll find out that Esau had a son by the name of Eliphaz. Eliphaz has a son by the name of Teman. And the likelihood is that they're not the actual individuals in this story, but that's the family name, or at least family familiarity, that is going to identify him to be an Edomite, a descendant of Esau. He is the one who's going to break the silence. Now, it's really not breaking the silence, because after last week's outcry of Job, there hadn't been much silence. That chapter is loud. It voices the pain that is there and the suffering that Job has been going through. But Eliphaz is going to be the one to say, I know we've been sitting here 7 days and we haven't said anything as friends who've come. Is it all right if I begin to speak? May I respond to what it is that you have said, Job? And of the three, to be honest, he is the mildest of the three. His comments that he's going to make, his line of reasoning, his approach in talking to Job, is actually maybe the kindest, not kind, but the kindest of the three. And if you put all of this together, he brings three pieces of evidence together. He says, Job, let me tell you some stuff. And here are the three bases on which I make my observations. One is, hey, I've lived life. I've been around things and I know things as they are. I've had my eyes opened in life. I've talked to people. I've met people. I've experienced. It is his observation. He says that he experienced a special vision, which almost sounds like God had revealed to him the answer to this question. Why do people suffer? And he'd had this vision at a previous time. And so he has that divine revelation, or at least what he perceives as a divine revelation. It's going to be faulty, so it's not going to be divine. And then thirdly, he's read the books. He has the collected wisdom of the age. What the fathers have passed down to the fathers, and now to him. Personal observation, revelation, and this experience of collected wisdom. Well, Eliphaz has 3 speeches. I'm going to make 2 observations about each of the speeches so that you'll have a flavor for the thought process of Eliphaz. The first thing is, in response to the lament that he has just listened to, he has some questions to Job. And a lot of what we're going to be doing is simply looking at some text. In Job 4, 3 through 6, behold, you have admonished many. He's talking to Job. You've admonished many, and you have strengthened weak hands. Your words have helped the tottering to stand, and you have strengthened feeble knees. Compliment? Yeah. But now it has come to you, and you are impatient. It touches you, and you're dismayed. It's not your fear of God, your confidence in the integrity of your ways, your hope. It's a little different when you're on the receiving end, isn't it, Job? It's a little different from when you're the preacher going around and giving the advice at the hospital and talking to people at the funeral home and telling them, hey, let me tell you how you can view these things. He says, you've lost your patience. You're crying out, you're screaming, you're raising your voice at God. It's different now. Then he's going to state what is his theological assumption. It will be true for all 4 of the friends. A 4th one will come in later in this dialogue. It really is even what I believe Job has in the back of his mind of what he's been taught, and that is that suffering in life comes as a result of individual sin. Here, again, Eliphaz. Remember now, who ever perished being innocent? Or where were the upright destroyed? According to what I have seen, those who plow iniquity and those who sow trouble harvest it. By the breath of God they perish, and by the blast of his anger they come to an end. So this is my observation in life. The people who have sowed good get good. The people who have sowed bad get bad. That resembles a passage out of Galatians, doesn't it? It's just that that's not a complete picture of influences that affect our lives. So the second speech begins a few chapters later. Eliphaz has a second opportunity to respond, and he charges Job with irreverence. It's somewhat similar to questioning the lament, but now he's really questioning Job's insolence toward God. Should he argue with useless talk or with words which are not profitable? Indeed, you do away with reverence and you hinder meditation before God. For your guilt teaches your mouth, and you choose the language of the crafty. Your own mouth condemns you and not I, and your lips testify against you. And then later in that second speech, he's going to restate his theology. I will tell you, listen to me. I always love it when somebody says, hey, listen, you just listen to me. I've got the answer. I'll tell you, listen to me. And what I have seen, I will also declare. What wise men have told and have not concealed from their fathers, to whom alone the land was given and no alien passed among them, the wicked man writhes in pain all his days. Sounds like a portrait of Job, doesn't it? Almost like, here, look in the mirror. The wicked man writhes in pain all his days, and numbered are the years stored up for the ruthless. Skipping down to verse 25, he says, because he has stretched out his hand against God and conducts himself arrogantly against the Almighty. Slide down to the third speech that Eliphaz makes. And now it hasn't been enough because he hasn't been able to convince Job that he's actually a sinner and all these things come upon him because of sin in his life. So now he's going to get a little more specific. And he is going to list possible, though it's almost going to be stated as presumed sins that were a part of Job's life. Is not your wickedness great, and your iniquities without end? Or you've taken pledges of your brothers without cause, and you've stripped men naked. To the weary you've given no water to drink, and from the hungry you have withheld bread. But the earth belongs to the mighty man, and the honorable man dwells in it, and you've sent widows away empty. And the strength of the orphans have been crushed. Therefore snares surround you, sudden dread terrifies you, or darkness so that you cannot see, and an abundance of water covers you. For you've been inundated with all of this loss. You've lost your wealth, you've lost your family, you've lost the support of your spouse, you've lost your health. All of this tidal wave of suffering has come upon you because you've been bad, Job. You've mistreated the poor. You've taken advantage of a person on a loan where you made a profit against them. You've harmed the widow. You've harmed the orphan. Pretty bold charges, all of them having to do with his loving your neighbor as yourself kind of concept. And then he issues one final thing in that third speech, a call for Job to repent. Yield now and be at peace with him. Thereby good will come to you. Please receive instruction from his mouth. Establish his words in your heart. If you return to the Almighty, you will be restored. If you remove unrighteousness far from your tent. Now, I think he begins with a compliment at the beginning of that first speech. And while he may be on faulty sand here, it is always at least a positive thing to say, Job, turn to God. Repent. Make things right and you'll be blessed again. And it may not be totally accurate, but at least he ends with not an accusation, not a condemnation, but with something that offers hope of restoration in a relationship with God. Well, now Job is not silent after any of the three speeches. In fact, there is probably a little more in those 10 chapters. I believe there are actually 6 chapters that Job issues in response to what Eliphaz has said. So let's see how Job responds to these things. In chapter 6, verses 1 through 5, Job answered, "Oh, that my grief were actually weighed and laid in the balances together with my calamity. For then it would be heavier than the sand of the seas. Therefore my words have been rash, for the arrows of the Almighty are within me. Their poison my spirit drinks. The terrors of God are arrayed against me." Then he raises this question: does the wild donkey bray over his grass, or does the ox low over his fodder? In other words, does an animal make a protest when he's hungry and he's wanting the farmer to come and offer feed? When he sees it but he can't reach it, and so you have the braying and the lowing, and the animal cries out saying, "I have need because I'm hungry." If the animal does that, why can't I, Job, cry out? Okay, his first response is, I'm justified in the way I've been talking. I'm justified in my tears and my lament and my appeal. The second is kind of a special point that I want to tie into one of the applications at the end. Remember in his lament, he talked about the value of going ahead and dying. He actually wished he'd never even been born, and that to die would be a blessing in the situation that he's in. And so in his response to Eliphaz, he's going to defend his desire to, and I'm going to put this in quotes because I think it's useful in our ministry, his desire to die well. Oh, that my request might come to pass, and that God would grant my longing. Would that God were willing to crush me, that he would loose his hand and cut me off. But it is still my consolation, and I rejoice in unsparing pain, that I have not denied the words of the Holy One. He says, I would be willing to die this very moment, not only to be released from the agony that I find myself in physically, but that I will have finished the course, to use Paul's language. I will have finished the race faithfully, not having denied the words of the Holy One. I think there's a very special place that we long in our lives when we're in the midst of, especially latter years and difficulties, that we want to be able to finish that course with faithfulness. We don't want something to happen in our spiritual journey that detours us away because we begin to question God and to doubt His veracity and His kindness and His love and His promises. And so Job is hanging on to the fact, as of today, Job 6, as of this moment in responding to Eliphaz's first speech, I've been loyal to God. I've not renounced anything about Him. And so death would be a victory. In the second speech, Job begins by criticizing his friends. Eliphaz is the one who has spoken, but we've already by that time heard both Bildad and Zophar speak. And all three of them have about the same faults as Eliphaz has. And so Job begins to criticize his friends. For the despairing man, there should be kindness from his friend, so that he does not forsake the fear of the Almighty. Oh, you take care that you're kind to me so that I don't give up on God. My brothers have acted deceitfully like a wadi, like the torrents of wadis which vanish. We're not familiar in English with wadis that much, but just think of a nice creek. A nice creek where water is running and things are dry, but you've got water for the animals to drink, and you've got water when you needed to go down and to get fresh water to bring home to sustain life at home. But if all you had was a dry creek, a wadi when it wasn't during rain season, and he says, that's what you all have acted like. You all showed up with great promise to say, hey, Job, your friends are all here. Look at us, we're here, we're going to bless your life. And I was so inwardly encouraged, but over a period of time, that encouragement has ebbed and waned because your words have been empty. There hasn't been anything of substance. Then Job answered, I've heard many such things. Sorry comforters are you all. Is there no limit to windy words? Or what plagues you that you answer? Windy words, empty talk. And then he's going to affirm his innocence. He's going to do this a number of places throughout these lessons or these responses. This time in chapter 16, Job says, I've sewed sackcloth over my skin, and I thrust my horn in the dust. My face is flushed from weeping, and deep darkness is on my eyelids. Although there is no violence in my hands, and my prayer is pure. The text where Paul talked about that I've done everything I do to live in good conscience before God and man, Job would have probably said the same kind of thing. Neither would have been claiming sinless perfectionism, but that their intent in life had not been to set out to engage in iniquity or selfishness or self-advancement. My prayer is pure. And then, finally, he calls for a hearing before God. And he'll do this again a number of places. My friends are my scoffers. My eye weeps to God. Oh, that a man might plead with God as a man with his neighbor. Oh, that I knew where I might find him, that I might come to his seat. I would present my case before him and fill my mouth with arguments. Now, we'll see this carried out when, in almost a sense, he gets that opportunity. But you see, he begins to distance himself from the empty words of his friends, the unkindness that he perceives from their hand, their disinterest in him, but their great interest in theological discussion in the midst of his suffering. He says, let me tell you, I need to find God. I need to turn to God. I need for Him to be the one who hears my plea. You all aren't listening to me. You aren't offering anything to me. If I just knew where to find Him, that I might come to His seat, I would present my case. I know in his mind it's that dissonance between, well, God is perfect, God is all-knowing, God doesn't make any mistakes, and yet saying, because I think he believed that sinful people had bad things happen, I haven't been that bad, God. You must have gotten me confused. Somehow, if I could just tell you, you've got the case number wrong. You've got my identity wrong. Somebody has, fed you false information. I don't know how much of that's actually in his mind. I know that's sometimes in our minds. There's got to be something that's not right here. This picture doesn't just fit. The best in the world sometimes suffer the most. And those who've sacrificed the most don't seem to have it come back. And that's Job's response. Let me spend our last 10 minutes or so thinking in terms of some caregiving insights that are drawn out of all of those rather lengthy discussions. The first is a reminder for us to be cautious in judging others. I have to admit, sometimes it's easy when you look at somebody who's going through some adversity and the thought runs through your mind, serves him right. He made his bed, he's going to have to lie in it. He got what was coming to him. Now, hopefully, about the time I think that or start to say something like that, I slap my face and say, that's not right. Now, I know sometimes people do so and reap bad consequences. I know sometimes there are health consequences that come to people directly because of bad choices that they've made in the way they care for themselves. I know there are people who have been killed in automobile accidents because they were drunk when they went off the side of the road. I've known that. But I've also known some people who were innocently driving back from a ball game and got hit by somebody who was intoxicated. And that guy lived. And the person they hit didn't. You've known those. I think it's a reminder to us that when you look at people's suffering, don't always connect dots. Now, this is as a caregiver. God will take care of all of that other, okay? Just let God handle justice. Because you and I quite likely may be as far off base as Eliphaz and as Zophar and as Bildad were. They were not poorly intentioned. They were just not privy to all the story. And you may not be either when you're trying to help somebody work through some great difficulty. You may not understand that some of it was inherited through their genes. There's a long family history of that particular defect or disease that goes back 4 generations. You may not understand what happened to that person when they were 6 or 12 or 17, and there was some tragedy that befell them as a loss, an abuse, a molestation. You're not privy to all of that. So as a caregiver, focus first of all on the pain the person is having and deal with that. And that's true with ourselves as well. Don't always assume that when you have something good happen in your life that God's patting you on the back and saying, what a good fellow you are. Likewise, when something bad happens, you may want to do the analysis, is there a link? But there may well not be at all. No connection. So be cautious in judging others and yourself as we seek to minister to the people around us. Job really wasn't interested, though all these speeches devolved into a theological discussion. Job was interested in somebody who would hold his hand and share with him in the pain he was experiencing. Secondly, listen compassionately to the pain. It is real. There are things that I've never had physically wrong with me. I've never had arthritis. I've had some surgeries. Most of my surgeries, recovered pretty quickly, and pain wasn't the main thing. And so, what's tempting is when you haven't experienced that level of pain or chronic pain, to just say, hey, it's okay. Hang in there. It can't be that bad. Think positive thoughts. Smile. We have all of our... Just listen compassionately to somebody's pain. That's what Job wanted. He didn't want them fussing at him because he lamented. They wanted him to amen his lament. Job, we understand where you are. May not have been there, but we understand you are. The pain people experience is real. Just because you and I have never been down their road, just understand that grief that they're experiencing is real. And understand that the trauma that they're experiencing because of a job loss or because of some financial crisis or because whatever it is, the pain is real. And while it may surface in different ways in different people's lives, some folks want to scream out and other folks want to isolate themselves, and some people become depressed and other folks act out and become angry. Your job as the caregiver is to do less analysis and show more compassion. If Mason was here, I'd say Mason's trained. Aubrey's got years of experience. I'd trust some of their evaluations and justice. Most of us don't have that. Most of us are not psychiatrists and we're not professional counselors. We're just hopefully caring friends who can feel the pain and know that it's real in a person's life. Don't minimize it. Don't try to trifle at it and say, it'll all be better. Because you don't know that. The third suggestion that I want to highlight is this. It is difficult to listen to those that we love talk about dying. Now, some of you have been through that with your parents as they age. And they'd say something like, I don't know why I'm still here. I just wish I could go on. And we say, don't talk like that. Well, we say that because it makes us uncomfortable. Not because they're uncomfortable. They're just like Job. They're tired of hurting. They're tired of not being able to do. They're all of those things. Job wanted to die faithful. That's why I called it to die well. And so part of our caregiving insight, again, is to spend more time listening to that person and allow them to express those thoughts. Maybe the place after they have done that or on another day to have a different strategy of trying to point out something that's a little more positive and looks forward. But for some folks, that's what they need. They need to know that's okay. It's okay to complete a course here. We talked about it in a different context. When I started preaching the thing you could not mention much in public at all and got in trouble mentioning something in a sermon early on in preaching, you couldn't mention anything that had to do with sexuality. That was a four-letter word that only had three letters. You shouldn't talk like that. It was off limits, socially inappropriate. Well, we quickly moved past that. And now it's death. We don't want to talk about death. And especially we don't want to listen to that. So as a caregiver insight, Job is saying, just listen to my pain and try to understand where I am. You don't have to agree with the person you're trying to help. You don't have to think they understand it right. All I'm suggesting is, as a caregiver, try to understand through their lens where they are. And then lastly, balance in our caregiving, hopes and reality. Hopes are what we want for people. We want you to not feel like, we want you to get over this. We're looking forward to this. And it's always nice to be able to help paint, visions for people who are struggling and are hurting. or to help them remember at a different point in time, or how they've been through this road, or somebody else has been down that road, and how it changed positively. But also balance what you hope will be with the reality of what is. Because the person who is struggling and hurting is struggling and hurting now. And ultimately, caregiving has to address the now. It has to address where that person is when you're visiting in their room, in their apartment, or when you're talking in the parking lot after a service. Balance what can be with dealing with what it is that really is. Now, I've tried each one of the lessons to come up with something at the end that is a takeaway point. And here's key observation number 6 for our studies from the book of Job. Always take time to look at the individual. Kind of a summary of the 4 things that I just highlighted. But here's the verse, and it's actually just half the verse. But it's from chapter 6 and verse 28. Job is responding, "Now please look at me and see if I lie to your face." Now, in the broader context, she's talking about where they don't think he's being honest and they think he's lying. And he says, "You look at my face and see if you think I'm lying." But it's that phrase, "Now please look at me." I think, Don, how many times? Again, well-intentioned, but you visit with people and you talk with people and you try to have the right words to say and you have a prayer and you got a verse. And what they wanted me to do was to look at eye to eye contact, hand to hand, touch. Acknowledge I'm here. Don't walk by me. Don't give me some platitude. Don't give me an empty promise. Please look at me. I think that's Job's ultimate plea that he brings to Eliphaz, and to a great degree to the other 2 guys as well. We'll try to hit some different elements as we look at them. Next week, Lord willing, we will tackle the voice of Bildad, and if you can see the fine print, you'll see the verses. If not, just flip through Job, and all your headings will tell you when Bildad's talking, when Joab responds. Let me close by sharing a story that ties back into this. I don't know what year this happened. It probably goes back a way, since it implies some technological inexpertise. But there was a fella who was making his first trip out to Las Vegas, and he was so excited to be able to go, not so much to Sin City, but he really liked glitz. He liked the lights, and he liked the scenery. And so what he did was he borrowed his son's little video camera that he had, and he took it and he fashioned his own little recording stick, so that he fastened this digital camera out on the edge of this stick so that he could walk around Las Vegas and he could film going down the street, but he wanted to narrate it. It's why he wanted to be able to tell what he saw and what was happening and how he felt, so he would have all of these things when he got back home. And he recorded this and he recorded that, and he had all this information, and he got back and discovered that somehow when he mounted the camera, he mounted it backward. And all he had was a close-up image of his own face walking around Las Vegas, talking to himself, so to speak. And I thought, how often that's true in life. I don't look at the people who are hurting, and so I don't really see them. But in a broader sense, that's what happens when we forget to look at God in our own journeys. And far too many of us tonight, at home or here, have life's camera focused on ourselves. And we're getting some really good pictures of ourselves and our accomplishments and our dreams and our whatever, but we're not getting a picture of God. You will never understand God by looking at yourself. You will understand yourself by looking at God. Tonight, as we sing our invitation hymn, as we reflect on the good news of a gospel that says, "Come unto me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I'll give you rest," it requires us taking our eyes off the mirror and to look at the God who invites us. Would you come to Him in any way that you need to while we stand?